All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone, and welcome to HathiTrust Discovery and Access at Harvard Library, the first session of the first HathiTrust Community Week. I'm Graham Detmers, the metadata analyst at HathiTrust, and I'll be facilitating this morning's session. But before I turn it over to our presenter, I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. Next slide. First, we want to take a minute to remind everyone that HathiTrust events adhere to our Member Meeting and Community Week Code of Conduct shown here on the slide, which can also be found on our website and will be posted to the chat shortly. Next slide. HathiTrust staff will be providing technical support for this session. So if you're having any technical issues, send a chat message about your issue and they will try to assist you. Next slide. Audio and video should have been muted for all attendees. Please be sure to keep your cameras off and your microphone muted for today's presentation. Next slide. When you have questions, please type them into the chat at any time. We'll hang on to any questions that we get during the presentation, and then I'll read them out later to the presenter at the appropriate time. Closed captioning is also available for this presentation, and a link to the slides is available in chat. Also, as you've probably already seen, this session is being recorded. We plan to post the recording of this session on our YouTube channel, and we'll also email a link to the recording and slides after that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Corinna Baksik, Senior Systems Librarian at Harvard University.
Thanks, Graham, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to start with an overview of Hollis, which is our online catalog. We are an Ex Libris customer. So the software behind this Hollis is Primo. That's our discovery system. And we also use Alma as our ILS. So Hollis has a ton of stuff in it. This graphic represents some of the things that most of the stuff we're putting in. We have all of our Harvard local collections. So that includes everything from Alma, which is all of our cataloged print collections, the MARC records. Alma also contains our licensed electronic resources, such as the journals we subscribe to. We also add images from JSTOR Forum. We have, I believe it's about 2 million cataloged images, almost all of which are digitized. We also include some geospatial data. And we do index the full text of finding aids. The main presentation of finding aids is actually in a separate system, but we do index the full text in Hollis for discovery purposes. And then once a user finds one, they can link out to the other system if they choose. Relevant to today's conversation is the Central Discovery Index. That is the massive aggregated index that Ex Libris has developed and that comes with Primo. And this is analogous to ETAS, the EBSCO Discovery Service. It's not the same aggregated index, but if you subscribe to some other product, you might have access to a different aggregated index from another vendor. In Primo, we can activate or deactivate a collection for searching. There are hundreds of millions of scholarly articles in Central Discovery Index. The Ex Libris also harvests a number of open access repositories and academic repositories. And of interest today, they harvest metadata from HathiTrust. So they offer 2 separate HathiTrust collections that you can activate. One is just things that are in full view in the US, and the other is everything, so full view and limited search. You can't search the object or the book itself in Primo. You can only search the metadata. So for the limited search things, I believe Ex Libris is full text indexing the full text, the open access HathiTrust things. But what we have activated is the full view US only. So those are the things that our users might encounter. Okay, so here's Hollis. Again, this is run with the Primo software. And we have a single search box, and we do try to keep the homepage simple and intuitive. Here's an example of a search result. So I've chosen an example that will highlight a few different things that a user may encounter. The first example is one of the digital images from JSTOR Forum that I mentioned. The second result is an article, and this is a scholarly article harvested by Ex Libris, and so this is one of the scholarly article collections that we can activate for search. The third result is a book that is from one of the ebook collections that we have activated. In this particular, or maybe not necessarily ebook, but a book collection. In this particular example, we don't subscribe to this collection, but we do still allow users to discover it. And we offer a link to ILL if we don't subscribe ourselves so that we can get it for them. The fourth result is a print book from Alma. And one thing I wanted to mention about this is that we do have a single page of search results. We don't use the bento box approach, which I mentioned because I know a number of our peers do use a bento box approach. If you're not familiar with that term, what that means is that you would have one space in the search results dedicated to just things from Alma, for example, or your ILS, and another section of the page for articles that are discovered through an aggregated index you subscribe to or some other source, and then maybe another box for images. Based on our user studies, our users definitely prefer just a single search result list with all of it integrated and blended together, and they can use the facets on the right to narrow down. So here's an example of a search result from HathiTrust itself, from that full view collection I mentioned. This example is called Your Dogs and Mine. And the way it's presented in Primo is that they do tag it with an icon called for open access. And the link in the search results go right to Hathi. So the image on the right is an example of what a user would see when they click from Hollis into HathiTrust. Hathi drops the user into the book viewer directly. I couldn't help but show you two images from the book because the book is about dog illustrations, and my favorite is the guy on the left, the tough guy, because he reminds me of my dog. So I do want to mention a few other ways to get HathiTrust bibliographic data. We are not using these, but I did want to mention them in case it's relevant to your institution. You can harvest metadata from Hathi using their OAI data feed. You can also download tab delimited files of metadata. It doesn't have all the bibliographic metadata, but it has enough to allow you to match to your own data set if you're trying to figure out what things from your data set might be available in Hathi. This is Bertha. She makes an appearance in all of my presentations, and she's not in the room today because she's been barking at squirrels this morning, so I had to put her in another room. Now I'm going to talk about how we're using the HathiTrust API. So when a user conducts a search and is presented with a list of results, if we do not already have the title online, so we only have the print version, we have custom code in Primo that will take that OCLC number from that result, send it to HathiTrust, and read the results from HathiTrust that the API offers. And if it is online in full view in HathiTrust, we then insert a link into our search results so that the user is aware it's in full view there and can go there if they choose. We do use a little bit of a different text. I like to use a different text personally because it helps me distinguish what things are being shown because of the API versus what things are shown because we maybe have a hard-coded link in Alma to something. So number one is an example of something that's full view in Hathi, and the link that we inject into the search result is view online in HathiTrust. We also do that if something is only limited search. Again, we only present this link if we don't already have it online, but our research, teaching, and learning staff do feel that it's helpful to when we don't have something online, to still present a search to HathiTrust if it's in limited search. And again, this is determined by what the API sends to us once we send an OCLC number. In many cases, we send an OCLC number that's not HathiTrust, in which case we don't do anything. But if it's an OCLC number that's in full view or limited search, we do inject this link into our search results. So if a user clicks on the limited search in HathiTrust, what they'll get to is a page that looks like the image on the right. In this example, I've conducted a search for canine, and I can see that it appears on page 19 and page 9. I can't actually view them because this is limited search, but this could be helpful in if someone wants to determine whether the object might even be relevant to what they want to do. And if it is very relevant, they can check out the physical book. Here is what the API output looks like. This format is called JSON. Hathi delivers a little bit of bibliographic data in the top section. The bottom section is for the digital object itself. This is an example where the original is from Harvard University. There's an item URL that goes directly to the digital object. And one of the most important fields here is the one we look at is the US rights string. That's the very last field in this in the image on the right. In this case, it's full view. This is where it would say limited search as well. Here's an example where there are two digital objects for the same book. So in this example, there's a copy from University of California, and there's also a copy from University of Michigan. This is actually quite common. And so we just pick one and put the link to that in our search result. I do want to emphasize that the API cannot tell you whether you have emergency temporary access service. That is, I think, I try to think of it as a separate service. You could use the API and try to make some assumptions about whether you might have access through emergency temporary service, but it's safer to actually use the overlap report that HathiTrust sends you if you've signed up for that service. Now I will talk more about the emergency temporary access service. And this is Bertha during one of early in our work from home days before she was bored with me being home all day. So once you ask Hathi to set you up with the service, you are required to send an entire file of your print holdings to them so they know what you have. Once you send that, they will develop an overlap report, which is they will send you everything you sent them, and they will add columns to say whether they have it or not and what state it's in. You are required to send 3 separate files to Hathi when you report your print holdings. You send a file of single piece monographs, multi-volume monographs, and a file of serials. And they will send, so in these, the first line here is an example of something that just didn't even match to Hathi. So there's nothing in the access column or the rights column. The things in the access column that say deny, those are the ones that you want to pay attention to. Those are the things that you will get through the emergency temporary access. It says deny because normally it is denied. You are not allowed full text access. But because of the emergency service and because of COVID, these are the ones that you can use in full view in Hathi, one user at a time, assuming you have only one copy. So our overlap report, the first thing we did with it back in March, April, when we first got it, is looked at, I pulled from Alma everything that we had on reserve and looked for those OCLC numbers, or rather our system numbers in the entire overlap report, because those are the ones we wanted to handle immediately as soon as possible. And we were very happy to find 750 matches, which I felt was really good, because we were within 2 days of receiving the overlap report, we were able to put online links in the catalog to the physical item, or for the physical items that were on reserve. So our users, we had already sent the students home. And so pretty quickly they were able to use the online object. So the rest of the file, we had 2.3 million lines in the file that said deny. So those are the things we get through the emergency service. And it was delightful to have this many, but it's a lot to work with. I did have to break things out into smaller files to be able to load things into Alma. Our goal was to load a link into Alma, which would thereby be exposed in Hollis for every title that we had in through the ETAS. It did take a few weeks. I used as a match point our local system number in the file, and we could have used the OCLC number for matching, but we are also at the same time doing an OCLC data sync. So some of our numbers are changing and things are in flux a little bit. And if I had used OCLC number for matching, there definitely would have been errors to deal with. And even with a very tiny error rate, because we're loading 2.3 million things, a tiny error rate would still mean thousands of things to clean up or try to identify, and that was too much. So we just put a link onto everything that was every system number from the overlap report. Let's see. Oh, and if anybody else is doing this, when you load a link into Alma, you put it in a collection. So I had a HathiTrust collection, and at first I didn't know what the limit was. I just kept loading things, and I had about 900,000 in one collection, and things started to slow down. And after that, I learned that Ex Libris recommends not loading more than 500 things into one collection. So now we have multiple collections, which is just an Alma grouping of the links. I do want to mention the priority order. Alma does allow you to set a priority order of collections, and that is only relevant if you get a title through multiple platforms. So as an example, let's say we subscribe to an ebook, a ProQuest ebook collection, and we get this book through there. We might also now get it through HathiTrust. And because we have direct linking set up in Hollis, what that means is that when the user clicks online access in the search results, we just take them to a platform. We don't present them a list of what to choose. We just pick one for them and take them there. And that's just simplify the user experience. That's what our user studies show is works best for people. So we had to deprioritize our Hathi collections so that the user would be taken to the platform that we license, because in most cases, we are allowed simultaneous users in the platform we license, whereas in Hathi, we're only allowed one user at a time per physical copy that we own. One other reason that it was really important for us to load all these links into Alma is that they had to be in Alma in order for Hollis to present them as part of the online facet. So our users do use that facet a lot. So this is a screenshot on the left is from Hollis, and this is an example of a facet a user might see. On the right, I have a table that shows the relative use of these facets. So as you can see, the online is used much more highly than any of the other ones. So we wanted to make sure that users, when they did limit to online resources, that they would discover the Hathi things. You cannot do this if you're only using the API, because the API is a real-time, and in order to have something faceted, it has to be indexed. So you have to be harvesting the data index to be able to index it, and that's why we wanted it all in Alma. A special note about serials, when we first loaded all of these, we did everything pretty quickly. Everything felt very rushed in March, as I'm sure it did for all of you. Drop everything and figure out how to deliver services now that we're all at home. We first loaded links to Hathi for serials, and that was a big mistake. I mentioned in the slide, I have the word portfolio. That's what Alma calls when you add a link to a resource, it's a portfolio, and there's some other details in there as well. But when we loaded the portfolios for Hathi onto serial titles, we had no coverage information. So we had no idea which issues or volumes or years were available to our users in HathiTrust. So we left the coverage information blank. But with that, the effect of that in Hollis is that when Primo makes the calculations of what issues or articles are available full text, it will look at Hathi portfolio and think, oh, Harvard has every issue of this journal in full text. So if I'm land on an article like I have on the right, Bark If You Love Me, that's a book review, Primo would say, oh, you have this issue in full text in Hathi, so I will take the user right there. That's obviously a problem because for serials, often things are not in Hathi. Only some of the stuff is in Hathi. So we ended up just removing all the links for serials from Alma because they effectively created a mess for our full text linking to articles. We do still use the API for serials. So even though we removed the link from Alma, if a user does encounter a serial title in our search results that we only have in print, if Hathi does have it online, we will present the link to Hathi, but again, because it's the API, it won't show up in our online facet. So I want to talk about the dynamic links to HathiTrust, though this refers to the way that I loaded the links into Alma. I did not hard code links to a specific object or hard code links to any kind of system number anywhere. What I did is loaded, what you can do in Alma is at the collection level, you can set a pattern. And anytime the link to Hathi is presented, it will read the pattern and insert the parameters needed. So in this case, in the box on the right shows what this pattern looks like when you configure it in Alma. But effectively, it's just a base URL. And we have a placeholder for the OCLC number. And we send people off to Hathi and we limit the search to just OCLC numbers. What this does is that when a user is in Hollis and they click on the link, they are taken to Hathi and a search by OCLC number is already conducted for them. And the OCLC number that's used is the one that was in our bibliographic record. So this works, most of the time works very well. Sometimes we have two OCLC numbers in our bib record and that throws it off. But the good thing is because this is just a pattern and not a hard-coded link, we can change OCLC numbers in our bibliographic record and it will get updated in Hollis. As I mentioned before, we are also going through a data sync, and so our OCLC numbers is changing so that having the pattern makes it helpful there as well. I was also delighted that we use a pattern instead of hard-coded link because when we first loaded everything, we did not know it was possible to pass a user through authentication at HathiTrust. Which became very important, and I have some examples of that later. One other thing I wanted to mention about this pattern is that you can use if-then statements where you say, if there's an OCLC number, do this. If there's not an OCLC number, we just plop the user into a search page in HathiTrust. But there's almost always an OCLC number unless for some reason somebody had to remove it because it was wrong. So I mentioned passing user through authentication. So with the way that we have the links now, which do pass the user through authentication to HathiTrust, this is what a user will see when they click on the link from Hollis. They land on a page of a search result for an OCLC number, as I mentioned, and what they see in the result is the link to temporary access. So this is relatively intuitive that they know, okay, temporary access, that's what I click on. Before we added the authentication parameter, this is what it looked like. So a user would click on the link in Hollis, they'd get to the image on the right, and all they would see is limited search only. So it threw everybody off. It was difficult for both staff and very difficult for our users. So that's why I mentioned the importance of this. And it completely threw off everyone, because normally we have single sign-on, which means that once you're logged into Hollis, you are automatically logged into anywhere you go from there. So you do not have to log in again anywhere else, because as long as the single sign-on is working. In this case, because we use a different authentication method in Hathi, that did not happen. So if you went from Hollis to Hathi, you had to log in again at HathiTrust, and nobody thought to do that. No, it's not something that would jump out at you as being to do, because you almost never have to do that. So you usually would get here and see limited search only and say, oh shoot, I can't access this. So in the screenshots I showed and the examples I mentioned, when a user gets to one of these titles in our search results, we have a link called Online Access that takes you right there. This is what a user would see if they click into the record and look at more detail. So we have a section of the record called Online Access, and we have this, I'd say, elaborate link and instructional information here. Usually we don't have anything like this for links. We just say full text available at EBSCOhost or ProQuest. But in this case, there were a lot of things about this that were not intuitive for our users. So we added this sort of lengthy text, and it also helps staff a lot, because if the online links seem not to work as well in the search results, they know to go into the record and see, what other information might be in here. So in the collection name in Alma, what we actually added to the name, this text in parentheses, choose temporary access, then check out. Because not only do you click on the temporary access button, you also have to notice that there's a checkout button that you have to use to get to the full text object. And we have a link to step-by-step instructions with links off to an FAQ in LibAnswers. So this is very important, that once we add these links to HathiTrust, it is imperative that we make our physical copies unavailable. Otherwise, we are in copyright violation. So when the only reason you can use emergency access is because of COVID and our libraries being closed. If your library is not closed, you are not allowed to use the emergency access. Our libraries are closed. We do have a very limited service recently available. But for any title that we do have access through to ETAS, we make the physical copy completely unavailable. So we ended up putting everything in sort of a virtual temporary location in Alma. And how we display it to the user is that where we would usually have the name of a location within a library, now it says physical use temporary prohibited. And the policy in the item record, it would usually say something like semester loan, and now it says temporarily prohibited. We do still have a link here to scan and deliver. That's the service where we might scan a book chapter for you. That service is not available for emergency temporary access. We won't do that, but we do offer this link in case there are missing pages in Hathi, which has happened a few times. So if someone clicks this and says there are missing pages in Hathi, we will scan those and send them to the user. For multi-volume works, we did load links to these in Alma, but it's at the title level. So similar to serials, we don't know which volumes might be available in Hathi or which ones we have temporary access to. So we just loaded a link in Alma that's shown in Hollis. And based on the previous slide, we made all the physical copies unavailable. So this is just the state of things. And what we encourage staff or users to do is if they find out that not all the volumes are available in Hathi, just let us know, because then we will make the physical copies that aren't available in Hathi, we will make them requestable so that you can check them out. We don't get a whole lot of reports of this, but it definitely happens. This is just an example of a work that has 11 volumes. And this is the same example from the previous slide where only volumes 3 and 10 were available in HathiTrust. So here what we would do is volumes 3 and 10, we continue to leave them in the virtual location where we say no physical use. This list, by the way, is from Alma. This is what our staff see, not what our users see. And all the other items that were not available in Hathi, we make are available through a regular request. So now I will change course a little bit and talk about the Alma Cloud App for HathiTrust. So the Cloud App service is a new tool that Ex Libris offers. And what the tool does is allows individual institutions who are customers to write their own add-on to Alma and then share it with everybody else. So they'll write their own add-on, then they'll deposit it into the cloud apps offered by Ex Libris, and then any other institution who wants to use it can use it. So here's an example of an Alma search result. We're seeing 3 different results. And when you're in Alma, in the upper right, you'll see a little icon. That's the Cloud Apps icon. In this example, I've expanded the Cloud App Center. And what you're seeing is the one I installed here, which is, well, and when I say installed, that's just clicking. I chose this one. This is one I want to show up when I open Cloud Apps. And so we're seeing the HathiTrust Availability Cloud App that another Ex Libris customer wrote. So Ex Libris did not write one. In the Cloud Apps, there are some things that Ex Libris developed and other things that customers developed. So once you invoke this, it just works automatically as long as you're on a search result page. And what it does is for every search result on your page, it sends an API request to Hathi to see if it's available there. So for result number 1, a dog's house, it found no HathiTrust record for the OCLC number we have in this bibliographic record. For result number 2, how's your dog's comfort? It is available as limited search in HathiTrust. And for result number 3, it's available in full view. So this is, it's a pretty new tool, and I don't have any specific use cases that I know of where people are using it here at Harvard, but we do offer it. And it might be, I imagine it's valuable possibly for collection development. And I know for preservation purposes where they might be trying to determine whether the item is worth salvaging or whether it should be replaced or not. Because if it's full view in Hathi, that will affect the decision. So now I will go into some additional technical detail, which might be really boring or really interesting, depending on what you do. And this is Bertha, caught with my slipper. She is usually a very good girl, but she has destroyed about 3 slippers. So here is the Alma import profile that I use to load the portfolio. So again, portfolio is the sort of Alma speak for electronic inventory. This is how you get the link for a resource into Alma and then exposed in Primo. So in the import profile, what you can do is you set up in the configuration piece, what you're setting up is you're saying, what collection do you want to load the link into, the portfolio into? You say what your input file is like. In our case, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using our local system number as a match point. So in our input file, all I have is just a list of system numbers. So the other parts of the import profile are the match method. I am using 001, so the MMS ID or the system number for our input profile is going to try to match the system number in Alma, and everything should be a 1-to-1 perfect match. For the merge, we have a merge method that we define locally where it says, basically discard the incoming record and just use our bib record. So all Alma is going to use with this import profile is it's just going to read the 001 or the system number for matching purposes and not try to read anything else from the input file, which is good because there's nothing else in there. And I have it configured to say if there's no match, don't do anything. And it will report to you if there are no matches. And in our case, when there's no matches, it means we withdrew something. So this tab is important. This is where you define what kind of inventory you want to make on this bib record. And in this case, we're making electronic inventory. We're saying it's part of a collection. We're saying it's full text. And most importantly, at the bottom, there's a checkbox which says whether you want to activate right away. And we do. We want it to be activated as soon as we load it. And that means that it will be exposed right away in Hollis. If it's not activated, it won't be exposed in Hollis. Okay, so I'm probably going to zip through this real fast, but I did want to put it all here in case anybody is using this. As I mentioned, for every link that we add to ETAS, we have to make sure that our physical copies are unavailable. So we have to identify what they are, and we have to put them all, well, how we're doing it is that we're putting them all into temporary locations with temporary item policies. But in our case, it was very challenging to identify all the items because of the fact that we had 2.3 million records to deal with. And in analytics is a wonderful tool. Oh, I should say, analytics comes with Alma, and it's a reporting tool, and it's beautiful. For our first round, because of the massive size, we did have to consult with Ex Libris and ask for the help in trying to identify all the item records on these system numbers. So they did help us with our initial identification. There were some gaps in that process, so we did use analytics to identify that. And we do continue to use analytics because we're sending updated print disclosures every month to Hathi and getting a new overlap report every month. So, so far we've gotten access to about another 100,000 titles in the last 2 months since we have been sending updates. So the thing I wanted to mention is that in Alma, you can't do a single report that gets data from both the electronic inventory and the physical inventory. You have to create separate reports. So what you have to do is create one report for your electronic inventory to find out which are the records I have a link on, and then feed that into the physical items report. I do recommend that before you change any of the physical items, you export all the details about those items. Because what we didn't at first, and what we learned afterward, is that some of the items were already in a temporary location. And when we put them into the new virtual temporary location for prohibited use, it overwrites the previous temporary location, but we don't know what it was. So eventually, when we lose access to HathiTrust, we will have some item records that will revert to their permanent location, but might actually be in a temporary location. So we have identified some of those. But going forward, we always export all of the items in advance so that I know which ones were in a temporary location, so we can restore them correctly when we do lose HathiTrust access. For temporary locations, one other thing I wanted to say is that because we have so many objects available to us in Hathi, we had to create temporary virtual locations for every library in order to maintain the correct library facet in Hollis. It would have been easier to just temp loc all of these to a single library, but then it would really throw things off for people who like to use the library facet to sort of limit it to kind of a collection. So for example, our undergraduate library, people might use that facet to just sort of narrow things down because to get a more manageable set of results. We do also have to create separate virtual locations for our 2 offsite storage locations. And that is so that things will be properly routed. If something's checked out and the user returns it, we need to make sure it gets routed to the right place. We have to have a corresponding temporary location for each offsite storage versus campus. This I won't talk about, but if you are going to create the reports to do this, this is more detail for you. Yeah, you can just refer to these later if you want to use these reports. I will mention, switching gears, I want to mention what's called a Primo Studio add-on. If you're a Primo customer, there is a tool called Primo Studio, which is similar to the Alma Cloud apps, where a customer can write a customization to Primo and then share it with other customers who can then easily add it to their own Primo. So in this case, Jeff Peterson at the University of Minnesota wrote an add-on to check HathiTrust availability. The examples I showed earlier are our own version of this. We created our own version, but if you do not have developers available to you, you can use Primo Studio to add this tool to your site. And I'm not going to go into any more detail about that, but I do offer some links here that can guide you through that process. This screenshot here is an example of what that add-on looks like as is. It inserts a link called full text available at HathiTrust with a little icon. With the add-on, you can change this link text if you want to, and I believe you can hide the icon if you want to. That's the end. Bertha was not happy when I put this sticker on her forehead. The sticker says I voted. She very successfully got it off, but I put it here as a reminder to just, I hope everybody votes. So now we will go into the Q&A period.
Thank you very much, Corinna. That was excellent. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. We've gotten a couple over the course of the session, and I'll start with those. So the first question is the Primo code that you mentioned earlier on in your presentation for the HathiTrust API available?
Yes, so our own custom code we do have available in a GitHub, but it would be easier to use the code in Primo Studio. So I'm just going to quickly go back to this slide. It's actually quite easy to use Primo Studio. There is a video on how to do it, and even I was a little afraid at first, even though I'm actually currently chair of the Primo working group, and I still was a little bit nervous, but it turned out to be quite easy to use because I did test a few different add-ons for other things. And so I highly recommend you go check this out.
Okay. I think the system number for the overlap reports is for the print. That's correct. So do you wind up adding the Hathi links to your bib or to your print bibs?
Excellent question. Yes, we do, which means that we have a little bit of an odd situation in the catalog, because when for our licensed electronic material, we have separate bib records. But it would have created havoc to try to create additional bibliographic records. It was much more straightforward to just put the links on the print bibs so that they're associated with the print bibs when you expose them in Hollis, and a user can see, when they see the physical items being prohibited, they know, the link will be on that same record, so that they don't have to go search somewhere else to find, okay, let's see where it is online, because I can't get them on this record. I can't get the books on this record because they're prohibited. So yes, it is. From a cataloger perspective, it can be frustrating because it's not based on our normal workflow, but from the user side, it's the most user-friendly thing to do.
Okay, so you talked about the issue with serials and ETAS. And so did you limit, or do you limit the circulation of the physical serials that do appear in the ETAS collection?
No. We did talk about the relative risk of doing this because it does, it is all a risk assessment. We determined that most of the time for serials, we have licensed electronics access to many of them. That's the online link that shows up in Hollis. So users will go to our licensed electronic resources. A few users, I don't know the number, but many staff know and will check Hathi if for something, if we can get something online through there. But most users will see the electronic link. But if we don't have licensed access to a serial and we just have the print, we don't expose the Hathi link, and we also don't restrict the physical items. So it is possible that we will allow a physical item to circulate even though there is Hathi access. But we have found that to be such a low, unlikely scenario that it seemed to be very low risk. I hope we're not violating. Oh gosh, I know everybody at HathiTrust is on this call, and I hope they're not like, saying, "Oh no, what are you doing?" We could talk later.
Yeah, I can not speak to that. That is not something I have any control or knowledge about. Okay, so I may have missed this, but did you, Harvard, work with Ex Libris to negotiate a short-term increase in your max number of bib records in Alma, or did you manage to get your Alma contract without an upper bib limit?
I can't speak to what's in our contract. I'm blessed that I don't have to work with contracts. I'm 99.9% certain that we do have an upper limit. We don't get any special favors. We did not add any new bib records though. We just added links onto existing bib records, so we didn't have to worry about that.
Okay, that's the end of the questions that we received so far. So if you have any more, please post them in the chat and I'll read them out.
I'll, since there's not an active question right now, just mention that I did mention that we have begun sending every month new print holdings to Hathi, and they're sending us a new overlap report. So we gain access to new things every month. We also lose access to some things, and I'm still working through identifying those. And so there's a number of those that I haven't removed the links to yet. So those links just aren't working because I have not done with the work. And those we will also revert them to their normal location. What we found in, we sent out September and October holdings. What we found in each month, we had a separate little glitch in our publishing process. So there was a month during which we lost access to 100,000 things that in our case, they were bound widths. So they were pamphlets that were bound with other pamphlets. And because of a publishing glitch, we did not end up reporting them to Hathi. We did in the next month, and so we got restored access to all of those. This past month, we had a different little glitch and lost access to 30,000 scores, but we are fixing that so that next month we'll regain access to those. And the things we lost access to in other cases had to do with, we might have withdrawn something, we might have suppressed something, or we changed our OCLC number and it didn't match anymore.
Bound widths are fun, aren't they? Okay, another question is coming. So, do you have anything you want to add about items in special collections?
Well, so the rare materials, a lot of them aren't in Hathi because most of the stuff that's in Hathi was, at least in our case, all of it right now are things that were scanned through the Google Books project. Those didn't include most special collections. So a lot of that is out of scope for the emergency temporary access. We do have a lot of sort of regular print items in some special collections. Like we have the Harvard University Archives, which collects things published by Harvard researchers. So we would have a copy there, but also copy in the general circulating collection. And we treat them the same way. We just make them all unrequestable. So that I think is the only place where the special collections really come into play in this.
I want to interject one thing. We've come up a couple of times as the OCLC numbers changing. We are aware of remediation and match in the way those numbers change, and the OCLC numbers should still, like, even as they change, they should still work in the in search. Like once you're in HathiTrust, they should still match up as something you have. But we know that there's a gap between what you report and what gets reported back, and that's something we're working on addressing. So that so we are working on that. Hopefully, something will come from that soon, so that that gap will no longer exist.
Well, I do want to, while we're here, give a huge thank you to HathiTrust because the service is amazing. What a world of difference to be able to suddenly get 2.3 million digital objects that our users can use while everybody is away and stuck at home or elsewhere. It's just it's phenomenal. So we were so excited when this was launched.
We love praise, that is for sure. If does anyone else have any more questions? We have a couple more minutes. Oh, I see one in here that I missed. I don't know if you're able to speak to this, but I'm curious if peers will be including ETAS in ARL counts for ebooks. I think this was also suggested to be discussed in our community Slack, which I suggest is a good place for wider discussions, but I can pose that directly to you, Corinna, if you have anything to say on it.
Again, this is one of the areas where I am blessed not to be involved in ARL statistics. I don't imagine we would report these, since it's really all intended to be temporary. And I don't remember the schedule for sending ARL stats. It's possible we wouldn't even have these anymore in the catalog by the time we produce our stats. Some of the things that aren't high priority because of COVID, sort of the timeline flips. So it might even be that we do stats really late. I don't know.
Okay, well, this one talks a bit, this question is a bit about the split between public domain or full text items and non-ETAS items and ETAS items. So do you add links to the print record for those non-ETAS Hathi titles? And do you in those, if you do you change the link text without SSO? Is their own collection?
So if it's one of our own titles that was scanned by Google and sent to Hathi, we do present a link in our catalog. We do have it in Alma with a holding where we say this was scanned through the Google Books. And actually right now, those links are going to Google Book Search to view, but those titles are in Hathi as well. Ultimately, we do want to point users to Hathi and bypass Google Books because our staff like Hathi better. We haven't managed to do that yet for various complicated reasons. But normally, we do not put full text links to Hathi. We do not catalog them. In some cases, on an on-demand basis, a selector or collection development librarian say, well, this is in Hathi and I really want you to put this link in Alma as part of the catalog record. So our users go there because I want to preserve our print copy or something like that. So on demand, it does happen. If somebody specifically asks for it, we will catalog the Hathi link in Alma. But normally we have not through everything available in full view in Hathi and then loaded all of that. We have not done that. For that, that's where we rely on the API. So if we have a print record and it is full view in Hathi, we rely on the API to expose the link to Hathi in our search results. But as I did mention, because of we're using the API, it is not faceted when you narrow down to online.
I think we have time for one more question. If anyone has anything they want to ask. Otherwise, I think we can wrap this up. And if you have any other questions that come to you, you can definitely ask them in the community Slack. I think that's part of its purpose, is that everyone can discuss things. So if something comes to you later, there's no reason you just have to let it lay. You can take it over there, and I think Corinna's in there, and you can ask her, or you can just post it and get everyone's general opinion. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording right now.